French arms company Thales SA has told the Pietermaritzburg High Court that the decision in 2018 to reinstate criminal charges against it was irrational and unconstitutional. Let's get more from that court case from our reporter Ayanda Mhlongo, who is standing by. A very good afternoon to you, Ayanda. What was the main crux of the argument by Thales this morning?
A very good afternoon to you, Nzing, and good afternoon to our viewers at home. Well, we've just seen Advocate Anton Katz wrap up his arguments. And initially from the morning, and we've been discussing this with our legal expert, that the two main points that the defense team for the French arms company Thales was going to make before the three judges here at the Pietermaritzburg High Court was firstly the review the decision by the NPA to reinstate the charges, as well as to look at the delays in the case. And without wasting more time, let me just quickly bring in Advocate Makhosazana Bonani just to get her comments and thoughts. Advocate, just quickly, we were discussing earlier on, a lot of time was spent by Advocate Katz on the issue regarding the reinstatement of the charges against the company he's representing at Thales, less on the delays. However, they're not done though. They are still going to continue after the break. But let's look up his point after tea.
Well, thank you, Ayanda. You remember that before tea, there was a back and forth between counsel for the second applicant and the judges. And it was this argument that there should have been a distinction in how the head of the NPA dealt with Thales as well as Mr. Zuma. And when we came back from tea, we picked up from that same argument, and the same questions kept coming back again, and you would have noticed that Madam Justice Poyodlwati kept asking for him to consider what the indictment says, but that's not a point that we can go into now. But his distinction was, his argument was, there was a procedural irrationality in that Thales is now being an add-on, as it was when the charges were brought, when the matters were joined, and when the charges were dropped and then reinstated. His argument, from what I can gather, is that they should have been given an opportunity to make representations to the head of the NPA. And his argument is that because that was not the case, there was procedural irrationality, not procedural unfairness per se. That is not his argument. And the question from the bench then is there a requirement or is there an expectation should they have an expectation to be able to make those representations? And does a corporate entity expect to be treated differently from Mr. Zuma because he's not a corporate entity? The argument went back and forth there and decided to just leave the point at that. When he moved on then to speak on the delays, he focused, from what I can tell, the first and the final requirements. You remember we spoke about this in the morning, that he must look, the courts will have to look at the prejudice, so the potential prejudice that would be suffered by the accused. Secondly, they must look at the case itself, the nature of the case, and finally whether it was systematic delays. He argues for the final one and the first one, and his arguments, from what we can gather, is that the accused, Thales, will not be able to have a fair trial because of these delays. And one example or one point to that is that there was witnesses were no longer available. Yes.
And just very quickly, of course, he wrapped it up there to saying that basically putting on the blame on the former head of the NPA, Mokotedi Mshe, saying that it was his decision that in fact has caused the delay. Very briefly.
Yes. Well, his point is that the delay was caused by the irrational decision, and therefore it's the state's conduct.
All right. Thank you much. We've run out of time, Advocate. Thank you so much for your time and her analysis there, Advocate Ayanda Mhlongo. We're at lunchtime now. The court proceedings will be back at 2 p.m. and that will be a continuation of further representations that are going to be, arguments rather, that are going to be made by the defense team representing French arms company Thales. We'll leave it there for now and back to you in studio.
Ayanda Mhlongo giving us an update from that court case in Pietermaritzburg.